Sitaram, and a pleasant good morning to all of our viewers and listeners, and welcome to another edition of the program Addiction and Recovery. I am your moderator this morning, Jason Kalu, and yes, it's a Thursday, July 27th, a day that we reflect and remember those who witnessed what happened in 1990 would know exactly what I'm talking about. So let me toss to the host of the program Addiction and Recovery, Mr. Ramnes Dwarka. Sitaram to you, sir.
I'm Jason, and let me join with you in welcoming all our listeners, both in Trinidad and Tobago and in the rest of the world, and all of those people who join us on the social media platforms. And as I say that, in the recent past, over the last few months, I've been recording the program and posting them on YouTube and Facebook. So any of you who missed the program, or if you don't have time to listen to it in its entirety, you can go to you can just type my name, Ramnaresh Dwarika, on YouTube, and you will be able to go back. And I've been packaging the program in such a way that they are dealing with particular topics. Like if you wanted to find out whether you're an alcoholic or drug addict, we dealt with the 12 questions. If you want to understand, okay, where you can go to get help, we spoke about the resources on the last program. And if you want to do it on your own, what are some of the strategies, the coping strategies that you can employ to stop and to stay stopped? What are some of the risk factors? What are some of the relapse issues involved? So you can go back and at any time, and you can also refer your relatives or anyone who has a problem so they can go in confidence and look at these programs, listen to them. I have been following it, and I know there's a lot of people who are now viewing these programs, and they're calling to get additional information and assistance. So again, I want to thank the staff at Jagriti and for doing the research as well, for the beautiful little vignettes they present preceding the program on the 12-step program and some aspects of alcoholism and drug addiction. And I want to let our listeners know that this is a call-in program, interactive program as well. So if you have a question, you can call in and we will be willing to take your question and respond to the best of our ability. This morning, Jason, I thought we could talk, everyone out there I meet, one of the first question on their lips is why people use drugs. Yes, we have been into several technical aspects of it, but the general impression out there is that it is because of peer pressure. If we did a survey and you ask most people out there, one of the top ranking reasons a lot of people think that a lot of people are encouraged to use and they are led to use drugs because of friends and peer pressure. And that there's a lot of truth to that, although it is not the only reason. But let us look at that particular precipitating factors you want to talk about it. Peer pressure. Now, if we go back into our own childhoods, Jason, you'll notice there are certain developmental tasks that have been identified by psychologists. You have the Freudian psychologists and you have other psychologists, but they both all agree that they are developmental tasks. The first developmental task of all human beings is called the oral anal stage. That is like from 0 to 3 years old, where children are learning, most of what we would learn in our entire life. We learn it from 0 to 3 years, Jason. We learn to stand up, we learn to walk, we learn language, we learn to discriminate colors, we learn to use our muscles and coordinate them. We learn to discriminate between, danger and joy, and at least the basics of the knowledge, the foundation of our knowledge is set during those first 3 years of development. And this is why it is critical that, parenting during that time is of utmost necessity. Unfortunately for us, Jason, we have been moving progressively into a world where mothers now have to leave and go, they are employed. They are well educated, and of course, they are getting employment and they are competing in the world of work. And as a result, they are not, a lot of times, they are not there physically within the first 3 years. If they calculate their pregnancy quite well, they may get to spend maybe 2 or 3 months with their newborn baby. But a lot of mothers, because they have to return to work, a lot of times they don't even introduce breastfeeding, although breastfeeding is I mean, critically essential for the child's not only physical development and development of the immune system and all of that, but more so for the psychological development. So that this is an issue I have referred to in the past. And, it is just like a building, Jason. If you are putting up the foundation of a skyscraper, if you don't set the foundation right, the whole building is eventually going to become unstable and will collapse in the future. It can become even dangerous. So too in the developmental stages of the human person, that first 3 years is critical. And while I don't want to spend too much time on that, but to say that, we have to find some way to deal with that problem, because it is what is at the root of a lot of the other social problems we will see later on in that individual's life. Because during that first 3 years, children learn either to trust the world or not to trust the world. The developmental task is basic trust or mistrust. So if they don't learn to trust the world, and how they learn to trust? They learn to trust when they cry that the mother must be there to comfort them, to breastfeed them. When a mother is breastfeeding, she's also making that bond between the child and her that breeds a sense of trust in the child. A child that is learns to trust in that stage becomes confident, and they will be willing to explore their environment and take risks. But a child who do not learn to trust is not attended to when they are crying. And when we leave these babies up to caregivers, we have so many history of children being abused, neglected. Most of the caregivers, they come in not only to take care of the baby, they are also expected to clean the house and cook the food, and they will be adequately evaluated on the food by the way it tastes and all of that. And visually, the mother and the parents can look at the house and see that it was properly clean, but the child can't speak. So who you think gets that sticky end of the stick? The child. About half an hour before parents would come home, the caregiver gets busy and cleans up the child, and makes them look presentable, and plays with them, and they look okay. But all day we have had so many instances of children being even drugged. I hate to say this, so that the caregiver can sit and look at the soaps while the child is drugged and asleep. So as we are talking about the causative factors, you have a lot of children who might have inherited the genetic predisposition from their parents, the same way we inherit their looks and ethnicity and mannerisms from our parents. We can inherit that predisposition to drink or use drugs if they have been using drink or drugs. But here it is another, it's a social factor here is where children will be introduced, even as infants, to drug because of what I'm just describing, by caregivers who are, not really supposed to be doing things like that. So, of course, there are solutions I have suggested in the past where Industry can now put a daycare center, where you have quite a few workers. You can pool resources together, so you can have a daycare on this job site where mother comes with the child and is given time to go and breastfeed the child. And you have a trained professional that is paid for by the company. And I'm sure that the unions would support that. There is in Israel, I know you have what is called a kibbutz system, where you have trained professionals where parents can take the children and have them supervised by trained people while they are at work. And in a situation like that, the mother is more psychologically comfortable, don't have to deal with factors like, after a little while you come home and your baby's calling the caregiver mommy, you know, and not relating to you. And I know a lot of mothers feel very peeved about that. That's a whole topic that we could probably discuss, but I know our forte here is on substance abuse, and I'm looking at some of the predisposing facts here, developmental facts, so that first 3 years is critical, but later on you'd find that, okay, at the next stage is what is called autonomy, you know, where the child or the young infant child learns to walk, to run, to climb. And if we throw our minds back, you'd realize, we get compared, which we shouldn't really happen. You'd hear these mothers sitting, my child already has teeth. My child is talking. My child is calling daddy and mommy. And and they're comparing notes. And the children are aware of this, and they want to climb higher, and they want to always push the envelope, as we say, run faster. And they do that by comparing with their peers. But that becomes more and more acute as we step into teenage years. That is when children start, the development task is to develop your own identity. It is called role, it's role identity. Sometimes some people call it a crisis, you know, where the child is now breaking away from the parent, developing an identity of themselves. And this is when they tend to naturally become very rebellious. You'd find children, and when I throw my mind back to that time as well, I have found the best way to understand children, Jason, is to go back to when you were their age. And immediately you have an awakening. And I realized, when my father was wearing fat pants, I don't want to wear fat pants. That's old people thing. When he was cutting his hair short, no, I want to grow mine. We want to develop an identity of our own. Before that, we wanted to imitate our parents. You'd see the little girl, or I would be wearing my father hat and shoes, and the little girl taking her mother makeup and going to town with it, and a mother chain and all of that, and we trying to look like our parents. And in that stage, before teenage, we are copying. We're also copying their habits. We're looking at what they do. We notice when friends come, the drink come out, and this is how they entertain. And we can't wait till we become adults as well to get the privileges that we see adults having. This goes for both men, boys, and girls. So we are copying our parents' habits. But later on in teenage, now we want to be different. So we are growing our hair, and we are, breaking away. We are cutting the navel string, as it were, the psychological navel string, as they say, and becoming an individual of our own. And that is really a time when there's a lot of confusion. Because remember, the hormones are kicking up now. Before, we would play with boys and girls would play together, and and never think about, well, she's a girl and I'm a boy. They are not aware of their sexuality. But at teenage, immediately you're starting to see the differences. The girls, their bodies start changing, and they're growing breasts and hair under their armpit, and boys too, voice is changing. And it is a time when a lot of people tend to say that the hormones tend to hijack the brains. And now if we put that in our current context, it is the same time when you have SEA and CXC and common entrance in the old days, and there's so much pressure on the young child. So that I have had the privilege of being with a research group and for the National Alcohol and Drug Abuse Prevention Program. And in those days, which was quite some 30 years ago, we realized that by the age 9, 10, most children in primary school had already tasted alcohol in some form. And I could speak of my own experience. I might have been just 5 or 6 when my own grandmother gave me a drink of cherry brandy. And boy, I never forgot that. I got it for Christmas. I used to look forward to Christmas where, they'd relax the rules and the regulations, and you would get a chance to go out and with your friends and drink a beer and all of that. Every house you went to, you could take a drink of wine. And by the end of the day, some of us were really drunk. And we remember those things. So now at 13, 14, the hormones are kicking up. We are developing our own identity and sexuality. Some, the talk is now girlfriend and boyfriend, who has girlfriend, who has boyfriend. And if you don't have, something is wrong with you. And boys and girls are pressured now to belong to the peer group. And I want to relate a particular experience that I might have related in the past. At that stage, I belonged to a gym where we were doing weightlifting and boxing and judo and karate in the village in which I grew up. So we had a very tight-knit peer group. Some of them were into bodybuilding, and we'd go to support them, and we'd go cinema together. And this day we were going to Mosquito Creek, and we were using the M2 Ring Road, and there was about 7 or 8 of us, mostly older boys. I might have been one of the youngest, but I was tall for my age, so I fitted in. And then while we were going to the Mosquito Creek to take a swim, one of the boys had a brown paper bag, and he opened it, a bottle inside there, and he took a swig, and then he passed it to the other guy, and 2 or 3 of them had it, and then it came to my turn. And Jason, I didn't ask what was in the bottle because 3, 4 of my friends who I considered like brothers, we are really buddies. They already drunk. I couldn't be less than them, whatever it was. I had a drink, and it was strong rum. They used to call it strong rum in those days. And boy, this thing blistered my throat going down. I couldn't stop swallowing for the entire morning. It was like if you swallowed a piece of sandpaper. But of course I smiled and I passed it to the other guy. Now that is what is peer pressure. You want to belong, you're not going to be less than anybody else. You want to show that if they could do it, I could do it. And from that was derived this saying, your friends could carry you, but sometimes they don't bring you back, because friends exert that kind of pressure. If we were in a group, I will not pelt the neighbor orange, or I will not trouble the girl. But if I'm in a group and they're doing it, of course I'll do it too, because I don't want, you get courage, from the support from the group. Now, I would want to quickly add, it is the same kind of support that one could get when they go to an AA group, because this group could encourage you to drink, but the same way they encourage you to drink, that group could encourage you to stay sober. So coming back to peer pressure, it is a sense of belonging, and there are so many other things happening in the particular instance when a young man or young girl reaches that age. So many things, so many stressors. And the young person like me who had an introduction to alcohol at an early age and knew how it felt, I never forgot that experience. And now, as a teenager, being rebellious and all of that, when me and my friends, we go by the river, they had dug this new river down at Suchi Trace, and we would walk from Gandhi village and go there. And then one of them would have cigarettes because his father was an alcoholic and he used to smoke. So he used to steal from his father two cigarettes and bring it, and they would light it up and they will pass it around, and we'd all have a puff, man. And again, it was seen as a rites of passage. We can't wait to become men. You understand? From boys to, we wanted to show, even though we had not arrived yet, but we wanted to show that, look, we were ready. We could handle our drink and we could handle our cigarettes. And those would be the earliest, those would be the reasons that I took it and other people took it, take it, take a smoke, take a drink. And the memory records these experiences. And when I took that drink, I know how I felt. It changed my mood. So that later on, when I had my own money, I didn't have a schoolboy allowance. I was working. I had a whole salary to deal with. And now I had moved away from home and I had the privilege and no supervision. I was ripe for addiction, to just the beginnings of addiction. Well, the seed had already planted. Now I just had I had all the wherewithal to continue. And I could dare say that a lot of people have had similar experiences in different ways. So peer pressure might have introduced me to it and might have introduced a lot of people to it and continue, because in the beginning, I did not drink alone. I never at 8, 18, 19, 20 go alone in the shop, buy a drink and sit down by myself and drink. No, most people start by socializing. They find it is drink is what is called a social lubricant. And then some people would have been introduced to marijuana as well. It depends on which geographical area you are living in Trinidad, Jason. If you're up in the East, Grandy and all of those, Rio and so on, well, they plant the marijuana up there. So all the young people, some of them involved in the business, they know where the fields are. They work in the industry as well, and they're very familiar with it. And so they don't see any problem. And especially when you have a government that just gone and passed a law saying, it's okay, it's not a criminal offense. And immediately I have been seeing people go overboard with this thing, even respectable people, you know, middle class people, professional people are now turning to this as a way of changing their mood and relieving tensions and dealing with stress. And these would be the things that would eventually lead you to become dependent and addicted, because a lot of people are finding what is called utilitarian purposes for the drug. So
Mhm.
that when you start using it to help you to cope, you have arrived.
While we're on the topic of
Yes.
marijuana, there was a thing going on when I was actually in UWI that actually smoking marijuana would actually help you concentrate more. So is there any kind of truth to that myth, or is that just something to encourage you to actually smoke it?
A very good question, and I remember Mr. Pandey saying, talking about half truths and innuendos when you said that. Yeah, there's a half truth to that. There is some truth that marijuana is a narcotic. It could, marijuana is the only drug that can behave like any other drug. It can produce sedative effects. It could produce stimulant effects like, amphetamines and cocaine. It can also be a hallucinogen. This is why it is so dangerous, because if alcohol is only a sedative and can do so much damage, cocaine is only a stimulant and can do so much damage, and heroin is a hallucinogen and doing so much damage, a drug that can do all three. I mean, if you stretch it doesn't take a stretch of imagination to understand that it can do severe damage. In fact, I worked at St. Anne's Hospital in the psychiatric setting, and I tell you, a lot of young people who are at St. Anne's there with uh, drug-induced psychosis, it is mostly because of marijuana. A lot of them are there because of schizophrenia, because of marijuana. Marijuana is that drug that if you have a genetic predisposition to mental illness, marijuana can precipitate it very quickly for you. But coming back to your question, I too remember being at university in Jamaica, and Jamaica has a reputation for producing some of the best marijuana. You know, you have Blue Mountain marijuana, and in my first year, I was still drinking and still smoking. You know, in '82, and so I had the chance to be introduced to it. And yes, that is a popular misconception. You know, we talk about misconceptions in a few programs gone. That is a popular misconception that when you smoke, it opens up the brain. Yeah,
Mm,
it does, because I remember as a little boy growing up in the village, the old people in the evening, when they come from work, they'll sit in a circle and they'll pull out one of the books, the Mahabharat or the Alha Udal story or something like that. And while they will start reading it, one guy on the side would be making a chilam. You know what's a chilam? It's an earthen pipe that you can use to smoke marijuana. And and he would be cutting the marijuana. And of course, these old people will not want us young people around because they don't want us to learn and pick up bad habits, as they say. But you can't fool little children. You see, I didn't understand it then, but I understand it now. I knew what they were doing, and they will make a chilam, and they ritualized it. Eh? Everybody would have their little red cloth, and they will put it over the mouthpiece, and they will one first fellow will, you know, take a few pulls to light it up properly, and then he'll take one long pull, and then he would put his hand together like this, because it is seen as a form of prasad for Lord Shiva, and handed, you must pass it on the right hand side, you understand, to the other person, and he in a very ritualized way will take it as well. And some of them would say, you know, Bam Mahadev, as to offer it to Lord Shiva and smoke it. And yes, when it is used like that, it can have a utilitarian value for socializing, for congregating. And when they read and they smoke, they will break, when they will usually take a break from the reading and then smoke, and then they will discuss the literature. And yeah, man, they'll go to town in depth with it at that time, because it opens up your mind, your vista, to see things in ways that you may not have seen it before. It actually allows you to think out of the box. And I think that is what they're referring to. Only problem, Jason, next day you can't remember one thing. I would read and I would see between the lines and all of that. The next day I couldn't reproduce it. You know, it didn't record, it doesn't stay. Yeah, while you're under the influence, man, I could probably tell you what Lord Shiva thinking. You understand, when he said something, but next day I couldn't remember. So your recollection is severely affected, and it does affect your brain as well, especially a young brain that is now in the developmental stage. Science has shown ways it has affected you. So that's a very good question. So yeah, again, but you see, it's peer pressure again, or wanting to belong in that group. You know, if you are not smoking, you will not be in that circle. I now realize that, you know, all the people were sitting there. They would not bypass anybody. So if you don't smoke, you don't join that group. You understand? If you join that group, you have to smoke. And there were rules for smoking. You couldn't take two pull, you know. They'll insult you, that you're greedy and all kind of thing, and call you names. So you take one pull and then you pass it. Anyway, but they have found, research have found that when it is used in a ceremonial, in a ritualized way, it it tends to reduce the propensity for addiction, because those people did not smoke all day. You didn't have it like cigarettes. They will go to work, and not every day. This wouldn't happen every evening, maybe 2, 3 times a week. You understand? But if you were smoking outside of that circle, they'll call you names like Lucha Gawar in Hindi, which means no good, you know. And so that I want to also, before we end the program, I want to speak about a lot of people, it's something that we have not been looking at. We are not teaching our children, Jason, how to postpone gratification. That is, we have come, yes, a lot of us have come from the indentureship experience, or our African brothers have come from the slavery experience, and we all suffered, and we were deprived of a lot of things. As a result, we don't want our children to have to suffer those consequences. So I remember in my early days as a child, although we were not very, very poor, but we had no electricity. The village did not have electricity, no television, no radio, no cinema until later on. So we would like for our children to have all the nice things. And so that mothers in particular, now they are going to work, there's additional income in the house. And we also have that kind of peer pressure from the Joneses, that, Jason, where you want to have the same better curtain, better furniture, better, So too, we use our children as our showpieces. They must have the designer shoes and the best material clothing, and now we have all of these Indian stores and so on. So our children are not learning to postpone gratification. That is, I want to feel good and I want to feel good right now. And whereas in the old days or before the onset of drug addiction, we would probably listen to music or play sports and eat something good, or go to a movie and feel good, feel happy. But once you were introduced to drugs, mind-altering substances, you realize there's a shortcut. That within minutes, if you're feeling a little bit out under the weather, or out of it, depressed, disappointed, sad, you remember, that when you take a drink, it can change your mood. And this is why it is called mood-altering substances. So that I'm saying this deliberately, that, as parents, if we don't teach our children to postpone gratification, we have them for a little while, These days, you wonder whether we have them at all, because little children from even infancy are talking down to their parents, speaking to the parents very authoritatively, and making demands because they're seeing other children having those facilities in school, over the fence, in the neighborhood, in the community, and so on. And they are demanding, children are like that. They will always push the envelope to get more and more privileges. And the parents, because they feel, because mother is working, for instance, father is working, and we are not spending enough time, well, we are overcompensating by give them anything they want. And we are justifying it by saying, I might listen, I did not have that toy. I did not have those privileges. And I don't, that's why I'm working. So we justify our absence, our lack of proper parenting by overcompensating with material things, and our children playing us to the hilt. And as a result, they're not learning to postpone gratification. And that would be one of the basic underpinnings later on that could lead them to start depending on drugs, because drugs will deliver that false sense of happiness and euphoria, in minutes. But I also want to point to another consequence. Children who do not learn to postpone gratification, that is, learn how to work hard and wait for the results. Like, for instance, you're supposed to study a whole term and then write the exam, and then you either come out first, second, or third. You understand? But it means working hard all through the term. But if we are learning that, look, we should have things our own way, then education could be seen as a pain in the neck, or maybe lower down. You understand? And this is why some children, if we, spare the rod and spoil the child, yes, we have stopped corporal punishment in school, but we are looking around and seeing, there are so many videos on social media now that describing the state of affairs with the relationship between children and parents. And it is as though a lot of parents have forgotten who's the parent here, you know. And I'm not saying that we should punish our children, we should deprive them, but we need to help them to appreciate the value of things. You know, I have seen situations with people very close to me as well. Every time the children go out, they're coming back with a toy. Every store they go to, they come back with a toy. Even the food places, the chicken and chips places, I don't want to call the names, they are all gotten into it by, you're getting a little toy. Until children, they don't value any toys anymore. They just have it and they throw it away. You understand? And they're not even sharing it. So that I want parents who are listening to this program to know that, look, one of our responsibility as parents is to bring up our children properly. They will be the generation next. You understand? And we are charged with that. They didn't ask to come. We have a responsibility to inculcate in them the values of society. I had a recent meeting with two of my grandchildren. And I said to them, look, we went through a little discussion. I asked them to tell me what's the difference between when you want something and when you need something. And it was interesting to hear these children. I mean, they're intelligent. One of them just passed for Holy Faith Convent. She was in the discussion as well. And she said, well, look, if it is necessary, she said, like, we need air, we need food, those are things that we need. And then I said, well, what about the cell phone? Do we need it or do we want it? And I see both of them struggling with that one because I know how attached they are to the cell phone. So I'm saying this to parents, we need to sit and have these discussions with our children and help them to discriminate, between things that they want and things that they need, because that will be of immense value to them later on when they have to prioritize. That will help them to make a decision when they either going to spend the $250 to go to a show or to buy a book that the child need. You understand? One is something that we need, and the other is we want to go to the show. So that they have to develop that discipline from now, because that will be the same discipline that will help them to make a decision to realize, look, alcohol is causing problems. Every time I drink, there's a quarrel with me and the spouse. The children are starting to lose respect for me. I'm losing time on the job. I have to do something about this. But if I did not learn that discipline as a child growing up, I will not have the fortitude now to make a decision to not drink and be able to follow through with it. So I thought these are things that we are not paying attention to as parents because our children are looking at us, but we have a responsibility to them. In addition, this might seem unrelated, but we also need to teach our children good eating habits. Far too often we give in to they want the pizza and they want the chicken and chips and they want this and what they see advertised on TV. And they don't want the fruits and they don't want the vegetables. And we have had a few generations who are parents now who have bad eating habits. Listen to what the professionals are saying and the minister about obesity. Addiction to food is another kind of addiction. People are addicted to chocolate and sweet drink and all of those things. So that if you really want to pass on, more important than passing on the house and the land and the money to your children, if you don't pass on good eating habits, good healthy habits, they will not even be around to inherit your house and land and money or to do anything with it. What's the point? So the best legacy you can give to your children is good eating habits, exercise, rest, the right attitude to life. And of course, you need to have these discussions about their friends. Who are their friends? You need to talk about, go to one of my programs and sit and look at it and then launch into a discussion and get their views and what they think about it. And if you're having trouble with them, you could call me and join me in the discussion as well. I would be happy. In fact, I want to say this weekend on Saturday, I don't know if it's open to the public, but I have been asked by the Hindu Women's Organization to do a presentation at the Balmain Temple grounds on alcoholism and drug abuse. One might want to inquire if they. I know it's a program for young people, but I don't know if you have to be registered for it. But people who are interested could probably call and find out if it is open and make themselves available. It will be a very interesting program. I will open the floor for questions so that young people can ask questions, So again, I see the time creeping up on us, Jason, whenever we're having these discussions. I want to again remind our listeners and viewers that this program will again be played on television at 10 tonight on TV Jagriti. And for anyone who would like to use it as a resource, there are many, many aspects, as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, that we have spoken about. Today, I'm looking at some of the why people use drugs. That was the question we dealt with. One of them is peer pressure. The other one is inability to postpone gratification. And there are other, of course, the example we're setting for our children, the environment in which they're growing up, the state of mind, and again, there are people who are mentally ill and who are predisposed to drug addiction as well because of prescription pills. The body is not able to discriminate which one is prescribed by the doctor. A sedative is a sedative, a stimulant is a stimulant. It doesn't matter whether you got it from a bottle or a tablet or whatever. So that, again, while I was doing the research for this program, I realized on the website that if you take in more than 5 different tablets for the day, I know that there are a lot of people taking for diabetes, hypertension, and for cholesterol, and by the time you get to 5, you are in serious problems. You need to start looking at that. So again, I want to refer to somebody made an ad. If you don't eat food as medicine, then you will have to eat medicine as food, and a lot of people are heading there. So I want to thank you very much. Thank Radio and TV Jagriti for hosting me again this week, and to let people know that if you have questions, you can call me at 671-3040. I'd be happy to respond to them. So thank you again, Jason.
Yes, I will always thank you for taking the time to do this program. Like Mr. Dwarka said, many situations can lead someone to use drugs and alcohol, but there are just as many reasons not to use drugs and alcohol, especially when you think of the repercussions. I am Jason Kalu, closing until next Thursday. Sitaram.